Thank you, and thanks, Elliot, for the introduction. Let's just do a quick kind of profile of the room. Who works on this? Who's with the supplier side of the industry in here? So, who works for organisations like me? And it's great actually to see a number of my ex-colleagues and present competitors in the room. So, that's going to make for an interesting conversation. Who's from the buyer side? I know a number of our clients are in the room as well, and so we've got a great mix. Okay. Who got their current job through the internet? Or some kind of social media? Some kind of social media. Who's been in there with a current employer for, let's say, 10 years? 5 years. Who has been with their current employer less than 2 years? So the number of hands go up in the room. Who's looking for a job right now? No one's going to put their hand up to that, or not many people are going to put their hand up to that. But, you know, if we look at the research, and this is what's so fascinating about being in Asia, I can tell you, although you might be happy in your roles, the research tells us at least half of the people in this room, so maybe this half, are looking for a job right now, irrespective of how comfortable they are with their present organization, irrespective of how comfortable they are with their present role. Because they want to push on their career, and there's a lot of availability, there is choice here in Asia for talented individuals. Interestingly, I was in China a couple of weeks ago, and China and Indonesia, those numbers go to like 65%. So we're very much dealing with a changing marketplace here. And I think a number of themes came out of this morning, which we're going to try and touch on with Hsiao-Wei. Please, as we go through, feel free to jump in. A lot of us know each other in this room, so no one's going to be offended by jumping in and giving your own viewpoint. But I'm not sure which session Martin's in at the moment, but Martin shared with us earlier on that Asia's a net loser of talent. He also shared with us the concept of the employability of talent. So if talent's available, is it the right talent for the particular organization? He shared that CEOs are more concerned about talent in Asia than anywhere else, which leads organizations to think about different ways in which they bring in their talent. Seng-Fong Ao from the Ministry of Manpower talked about outsourcing. He talked about treating the partners as friends. He talked about true partnerships and mutual respect for those organizations. And as we go on to talk, I think that's one of the very fundamental parts about our relationship with Tetra Pak. Roop talked about 92% of organizations are concerned about talent in APAC. And then Kimberly talked about the quality of hire. You know, we've got a lot of talk, we hear a lot of talk about the cost per hire, the time to hire, and Kimberly also pointed out the challenge that organizations have to be able to manage the effectiveness of that hire as well. So hopefully, between us, we'll touch on a few of these things as we actually go through today. But first of all, just cover a couple of points. Now, I've got no idea which way to point this, but I'll just point it. Oh, it worked. Okay, I'm not going to stand here and try and define RPO. I guess we've got many definitions of what we mean by RPO in this particular room. But when I talk about RPO, I'm just talking about really when an organization outsources all or part of its recruitment process. I won't go into the numbers here so much, but if you look on the little circle on the bottom left, it's really showing the average growth for RPO in the Asia-Pacific region. In recent years, the last couple of years, and over the next 4 years, or 3 or 4 years. And the fact is, it might be a $2.9 billion industry, or however we measure it, and we see different numbers. We see 0.7 billion of that in APAC. But the fact is, it's growing very, very rapidly. I saw another report last week that said basically multinational organizations, of the multinational organizations that are operational in Asia-Pacific, 45% have outsourced recruitment in some way or other. And that number is likely to be in a couple of years, because 65, 70% So we do have to think about different ways of doing these things. And we certainly, I loved Elliot's point earlier on about, APAC isn't an emerging market and China and India leading in the 1800s. A lot of us don't really think about it that way. Let's just look at some of the drivers. Some of the conversations we have with our clients, our potential clients, and I know my industry colleagues in the room are having the same types of conversations because it is about need. Organizations looking for better talent, cost reduction. How many times do we hear that number, cost per hire? How many times do we dream about that number, cost per hire? Time per hire, scalability and flexibility. I saw a report out of the US the other day that basically said one of the biggest challenges of the RPO industry globally is to manage that, or to be able to truly manage that fluctuation in supply and demand from the client side. Process improvement, process efficiencies, augmenting or replacing internal recruitment departments. That's something that very much varies by country, but we know that many of the organizations, many of the countries that we're working on, they just simply can't get enough recruiters as well. So we're augmenting their teams in many respects. And recruiting for a global workforce. More and more organizations are getting a lot clever about moving people, not only with the country that they operate, but across the region and also across the globe. And I think we've got a much bigger part to play in that. I'm not going to talk about the top part of this, but that slide really talks about, when we all started talking about RPO 10, 15 years ago, and I'm not sure is Kimberly in the room, but we were all involved with that first program. We actually worked together at Johnson & Johnson. It wasn't about employer branding then. It wasn't about post-onboarding. We've gone a lot, we've gone a much deeper stage further. RPO looks very much different now, strategically in bed with the client, if you like, on a day-to-day basis, feeling the pain together and growing together as well. And also, I'd encourage you, we're seeing more and more, even sort of 5 years ago, 4 years ago, RPO was in one box, MSP was in another box, ATS systems were in one box, Fieldglass or Provade or whoever, from a technology perspective, with another box. But we're seeing all of this coming together. And globally, frankly, our clients don't care, or the customers don't generally care how we define these things. They have needs in terms of people. They're concerned about the supply chain of people into their organization, whatever they look like and whatever technology platform we're using to track them through or bring them through. So I think now we have to think much more than just boxing one product or one solution and really look at it from a true solutions perspective from the client's point of view. And that's really, I guess, how we started our relationship with Tetra Pak. And just in case you don't know who Tetra Pak is. Thank you. Before I give the floor to Hsiao-Wei, I just thought I'd explain a little bit about the program that we have in place. And this came back from a call, I think, probably the end of 2011. I think we had a call. I'll never forget the call, actually. It was quite close to Christmas, and we had a call from an executive in Tetra Pak who was actually based in Thailand at the time. And the call kind of went along the lines of, I think you guys do RPO, right? And yes. And but it was one of those opportunities that we got very excited about for a number of reasons. Firstly, this was a customer who had already decided that they were going to go down the RPO route. And you know, for my industry colleagues, how much time do we spend in boardrooms or in meeting rooms explaining the concept of RPO and outsourcing in general and starting to take our potential clients down the path. But this was a client who really knew what they wanted and was able to explain in broad terms to us in a relatively short period what they needed, what the vision was for recruitment, and the reasons for actually doing it. So we turned up to present our initial proposal. And the meeting, immediately, I think there was a great chemistry in the room. And part of that was because it was a very open environment in the room. And Hsiao-Wei was in the room, and the team very much opened up to us as we were opening up to them in terms of our proposition. But this team very much put the needs, the requirements, the challenges straight in front of us. So we weren't playing guesswork from day one. Obviously, we tweaked things as we went along, but we weren't playing a guessing game. But the basic scope was 7 countries. I won't go into too much detail over everything, but basically 7 countries, predominantly permanent hire, but also responsible for contingent hiring. So I was just saying, as we're looking to, as these models are coming together, day one, this was very much the case. Using Taleo, Tetra Pak were just adopting Taleo at that time, and recruiting for both blue and white collar. So across the board, across the geography, and permanent and temporary hires. And I guess the other interesting thing about it was a big bang approach. And Hsiao will explain a little bit more as we go through. But in May last year, we kicked off the whole program in one day. And since then, we've started working with a couple of other countries with Tetra Pak, but essentially these countries you see here, we kicked off in one day. And just in terms of some of the things we've already talked about in this meeting, and I'm going to pass across to Hsiao-Wei. But if we look at the first year, obviously, you know, a lot of people are interested in time to hire, cost per hire, agency usage, and volume. Get me the right people in the right place at the right time and at the right cost is basically the message we get from a number of our clients. Immediately, the number of requisitions went up, which was due to good business as opposed to any other reason. It certainly wasn't due to attrition or anything like that, but immediately we needed to cope and manage a much bigger volume than we originally anticipated. And in the first 12 months, we saw a 66% increase in volume. Cost per hire, down 26%. Time to hire was also down in 26%. And whilst we do use third-party agencies as part of the program, and I guess that's another thing that's slightly different about the program, we brought that agency usage down to 57%, which means a smaller number of agencies are getting a bigger piece of the pie, actually, now. So I think there's generally amongst the community, there's more contentedness, if you like, within the agency environment as well. And these are numbers that we all look at very closely. These are the numbers we jointly dream about, and that we're all challenged by our stakeholders on. So, Hsiao, I must thank you for coming to join us.
Thank you for the opportunity.
I'm not sure, when we spoke a couple of months back, or 3 months ago, I kind of said to Hsiao-Wei, well, we can just kind of sit on the sofa and have a bit of a chat and that type of thing. I forgot to tell her the room might be actually full of people from... Was that me?
Yeah, I think that's me.
We just can't get too close together, otherwise we go on.
Yeah.
I'll sit over here. I'll sit over
Laws
here.
of attraction.
Oh, and don't drink the milk, by the way. This Tetra Pak carton. If you've got some on your thing, I'm not sure how fresh it is. But just very quickly, Hsiao-Wei, we've heard your professional background, but it would be great to know you a little bit better, or for everybody else to know you a bit better. What's your favorite food?
Well, I like to eat. My all-time favorite, I guess, sushi.
Sushi.
You're going to reveal all my dark hidden secrets.
Yeah, I want to know.
Right?
I want to know all the dirt.
Ah, dangerous. Okay.
Now, I don't know the answer to this one. Have you got a nickname?
Actually, I don't, but I think it's refreshing enough to hear my name pronounced in different ways. So I respond to anything that sounds remotely like Hsiao-Wei. Try that.
What is the most played song on your iPod?
Well, I don't have an iPod, I have my phone. It's actually this song called Breathe. It's by Terry White. It's a contemporary gospel song. So I listen to that just to get mindful.
And we've heard about your career, a very successful career, both in consulting and corporate life. What do you want to do when you grow up?
I thought I'm quite grown up, no? I think I can embrace who I am today, so not thinking much about that anymore.
Okay, and finish this sentence for me before we go on to the other stuff. I'm glad I put matching socks on today, by the way. The best part of waking up is?
Waking up. I think the opportunity to just, wake up and choose how I want to live today is the best part of waking up. Of course, it's better to wake up at 10 a.m. rather than 6 a.m., which I had to do today to be here on time.
You just pointed at me when you said 10 a.m. then. I don't wake up at 10 a.m. Okay, thanks, Hsiao-Wei. Okay, just before we get into the program itself, when we first met, there was a lot of talk about a global initiative, which was called One HR. And I know it's a very high program globally across the organization. Can you tell us a little bit about that program?
Sure. And I think if it's okay with you, I'm not quite used to sitting, for too long, so I'm just going to be walking around a little bit to maybe use the whiteboard a little bit, if that's fine. If I tend to speak a little too fast, just slow me down. So thanks for introducing One HR. I mean, One HR is a Tetra Pak global initiative that is intended to change the way HR delivers its services, as well as the way we support the business and employees. It's going to be a long conversation about One HR, so let me try to simplify it by using the whiteboard and just present it visually. Basically, if I frame it this way, before One HR, so if I'm going to write it, is this big enough to be seen from the back? Good.
Do you want me to move it forward?
So before One HR, we have, or the way HR is set up, it's basically how traditional HR departments are set up. So in every country, we would have, a team of HR generalists. So you have all the different teams in the 7 countries, so on and so forth. And, they're delivering the same services. It's just being replicated at the same time. Okay. So what One HR does is it introduces a model or a concept whereby instead of having generalists, we move towards being a specialist. So One HR is a specialist model where you have basically 2 components, the HR business partner and then the HR shared service center. So still delivering the same services, but in a more effective and efficient way. So why do I say that? I mean, if you think about this way, everyone is doing recruitment, everyone is doing payroll, at the same time, and using different resources. So if you multiply that by the 7 countries, you can imagine that if you were to list the amount of effort and time spent on each of these processes, you get a triangle, right? Why is it a triangle? You've got lots of admin, lots of transactions, so you've got admin, you've got transaction, you've got driving performance, and you've got strategy. But, just by the sheer number of countries and, the same thing being done everywhere, you get it in this shape, whereby, you have a good 70% of the time that's in this area. So when we move into this model, what we wanted to do is we wanted to change, actually, the triangle into another shape. Ladies' best friend, tell me what that is. Come on, man. Diamond, perfect. Oh, glad you got this right. The last time I asked this, they said pear or hourglass, and I said that's what you guys dream of, right? But we ladies like diamonds. Okay, so it's really about changing, from a triangle to a diamond, whereby if you list it, by the same activity, immediately you see that there's a reduction here. So we're talking about, for example, 40%, as the ambition that we should be spending our time on doing, admin and transaction, and then we free up or we allocate resources in the right places, whereby it's where it makes the most difference to the business. So it's about driving performance and strategy. Right, so basically in a nutshell, that's the concept. Moving from generalist, everybody doing the same thing at any one time, into a specialist model structured into business partner, focusing on the performance and the strategy part of it, and the HR Shared Service Center, focusing on delivery HR services in a more centralized, in a more efficient, in a more synergized way. Right. Get the gist? Okay.
Any questions on that, or should we move on? Okay, thanks, Hsiao-Wei. Well, ask away.
What was the, did you do any benchmark comparison to the world-class standards like Hackett and all in terms of the FT or cost allocation for strategy, COE?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And how did it compare to that? I mean, I'm not asking absolute numbers, but some percentages and differences would be good, yeah?
Sure. I mean, definitely the benchmarks were important because those were, set as ambition. And, in a service center, everything is measured by KPI, so you've got the productivity measures and all. I'm happy to say that the service center today is looking very well. It's, in the best in class in terms of our benchmarks. So it's about sustaining and making sure that we continue to do that.
And what was the FT allocation by percentage? I'm not asking absolute numbers again, on strategy, business partner, and shared services.
So we have about, here it's about moving to 40%. So then you have got 60% up here.
Thank you.
Yep.
Okay, so Hsiao-Wei, I know at the start of the program, obviously it's about the stakeholders and their expectations. And I know stakeholder expectations aren't always exactly what we expect them to be as an outsider.
Right.
So in terms of Tetra Pak, what were the expectations of the stakeholders, not necessarily as far as RPO was concerned, but as far as recruitment was concerned? As far as the solution that you adopted, what were their expectations?
I mean, great question. I think, it's very important, especially for HR, to not think that we know exactly what the stakeholders want, because from the business perspective, it might look different. So it's really important that before we do anything, that we find out, what exactly are the expectations. So when we thought about the recruitment delivery model, what I wanted to get really clear is what is it that the stakeholders want to see from what they would think to be a successful recruitment delivery model. So what came up is, this term, to get things cheaper, faster, better. So they're really looking at being able to get in quality hires within the shortest time possible, at the most, cost-efficient price. We're also looking at being able to be flexible enough to meet changing demands. They were also looking at making sure that it is not difficult to adopt, it's not difficult for the hiring managers, that the process is simple, it's effective, and it's basically the same everywhere in the different countries.
So again, it's about getting the right people in the right place at the right time.
Absolutely.
With the right skill sets through the right process.
Absolutely.
And I think that was something that, I forget whose presentation it was this morning, but process was coming out as one of the most important factors as far as recruitment was concerned. I was really surprised to see that come out at a higher percentage than employer branding. Sorry, use yourself. But that was really interesting. And it just shows how we've got to get that process right as an industry for our clients and with our clients. And as end users, that process needs to be absolutely fluid as we go through. Okay, moving along. So,
I have a question about how and I think some of the audience would really like that. How did the deal actually get done? Because one of the things that I think a lot of people struggle with here is, as you're going through the metrics, but I think one of the things that I'd almost like to know first is how you can track it. Okay, so your company's based in Lausanne, Switzerland, but did you make deal with Kelly in APAC, or was this a global program? Because a lot of people here have to go and get their program sort of approved through a corporate office. So, it's not on?
Yeah.
All right, this one's not on either. These guys just don't like me back there. All right, so how did the deal get approved? So can you just give us a little bit on that, just a moment or two? So how did you get this design? Because you had tremendous success based on the stats. How did you get this initially sort of approved? Was it global, et cetera?
Do you want to take it here? Or because I think we are going to talk a little bit.
Sure,
about
it'll
that
kind of come up,
later.
but
yeah.
in essence, the deal was done here. And I think we had as a team, we had the advantage that the decision makers from both sides of the equation were actually here.
Yeah.
And we all needed sign-off from elsewhere. And also, somebody talked about procurement earlier on. Procurement was aligned with the process. So I'm not sure if the lady who asked about procurement earlier on, but procurement was very aligned with the process as we went through. So I think the various stakeholders were involved. But that kind of moves us on to the next slide as well. If I can get the tech, where am I supposed to be? Help. Is there anybody that can help with the slide?
Maybe you can do it manually, perhaps?
Would you mind just moving to the next slide? Thank you. Next slide's my favorite one as well.
I think the carousel's got stuck.
Okay, thank you. I love this picture, and I'm going to let Hsiao-Wei explain why I love this picture. But also, Elliot, to your question, this really talks about how, or talks to how Tetra Pak were able to move this through their organization to the contract stage. So I'll pass it across to Hsiao-Wei. Really, with the question is, how did you reach the decision to outsource recruitment, and what were the barriers to actually do that?
Okay, you know, this picture was selected for a reason. So if you look at the first picture, this one, the one with the need. So why outsource recruitment? First, there is a need, and then there is an opportunity. So let me use this analogy. So if you look at what's in the picture, we all need to drink, right? But we can drink better if we drink it from our Tetra Pak package. Tetra Pak packages, you know, protects what's good, if you notice in the corporate video. So really, so why outsource recruitment? And perhaps if I can just go one slide back, if you could just go one slide back, the need. So let's talk about the need, because everything has to, you know, we have to have that very clear line of sight as to what exactly are the needs that we're trying to meet. So the need of recruitment are here. So the opportunity for us then to be able to get from outsourcing RPO, so outsourcing recruitment, let's talk through it. Surface quality people, hire in shorter time. What does this really mean in terms of being able to do this? What would enable us to be able to do this? I think here we're talking about making sure that there is a solid, ready infrastructure. For example, sourcing capabilities, to be able to surface quality candidates readily and in good numbers. We're also talking about the opportunity to make sure that it's not just generalists who are delivering this, but we have got experienced professional recruiters who are actually doing the recruitment part of the services. So that's the opportunity that we saw by outsourcing recruitment, what we could get. In terms of meeting changing demands, I think here it's where, you know, the beauty of outsourcing it is there, because of the structure, the infrastructure, and also the resources that are available at the back end, you could readily scale up. So then there is this flexibility to say that, okay, I need to bring in, this other half a head count, or, this other person for 3 days a week because there is a sudden surge in the demand. Versus if you were to insource, it would actually mean having to hire someone, and then, in this part of the world, it might be a bit tricky to hire somebody on a part-time basis. Cost benefit, we're depending a lot on agencies, third-party agencies, as you could see in Martin's first slide. So when we thought about outsourcing it, the immediate thought for us is, okay, then we can rely less on third-party agencies because then we could, hire through the RPOs. That would translate into cost benefits. The last one, the effective and consistent process. What we could do in the design of the program is to make sure that we build in the same process, regardless whether it's blue collar or white collar or contingent workforce. We could just have one simple, consistent process, so it makes it easier for the hiring managers. Yep. So there you have it. The reason for outsourcing really is driven by the need, but making sure that we're leveraging the opportunities to be able to do that better.
Thank you. I've broken your... Can I just say, if you just look at the right-hand side as well, I think this was actually an internal slide that was used within Tetra Pak, if I'm not wrong. And if you can see a little resemblance on the right-hand side, on the right picture, to the lady sitting to my left, it's actually Hsiao-Wei's daughter. So I better share that and get that. Oh, yeah. Okay.
That's the other secret. Right?
Okay, if we can move to the next slide, please. Okay, so getting off the ground. From a kind of bias perspective, if you like, and taking it through your organization, what were the biggest challenges on really making this thing happen?
I think the biggest challenge really is that it is a new concept. And I think it's also a fact that RPO is in its developing stage in this part of the world. So we are very clear exactly what we want and what we want to achieve. We were not so sure, if there were going to be ready, providers that would be able for us to say plug and play right from the beginning. So it's just convincing the stakeholders that in theory it all sounds good, that is actually going to work in reality. Yeah.
Fantastic. And what about the supplier side? Can you explain to us the process that you went through with the suppliers? And probably a number of us in this room might have turned up, so maybe don't quote names, but what your experiences as potential suppliers were coming through and the different messages we were giving across to you. What was the kind of learning or any advice that you'd have for us as an industry?
Okay, I think here perhaps I'll focus more on what would be the criteria for selecting the suppliers. I think what is important for us is, here we always believe in what is the end outcome, what is the goal in mind, what is that vision. And looking at that, it would help us be able to determine what exactly would be the criteria for us to use to assess the different suppliers. And then we're using those same criteria to assess every supplier for all fairness and consistency. So if we look at the criteria, I think the first thing that was very important for us is we are delivering services to 7 different countries. So presence of the supplier in each of those countries, that was key for us. So do they have presence there? Are they operating there already? Then it's also understanding their technology. So, how familiar are they with Telio? How much technology do they use to track or to run the operations? That was also important. Then we're also talking about the infrastructure, because if you remember, one of the key objectives of outsourcing is that we want to have a ready infrastructure. So how established is the infrastructure of the supplier? That's also another very important criteria. How process-oriented are they? How do they go about surfacing candidates and attracting candidates? That was also, an important criteria for us. So those are more the factual stuff. But I think there's something else that was very important for us as well, Martin. I think you mentioned about the chemistry.
Yeah.
It's a bit hard to put your finger on it. I think it's important to understand the culture and the values of that supplier, how they engage their people, because we are talking about working with recruiters that actually belong to the provider. So it's important that the recruiters are feeling valued and they're feeling taken care of. So the overall culture is important to ensure that we have, engaged on-site recruiters with us. It's also about, this sense of whether it's collaboration or partnership, this common vision. Do they share, are they aligned with Tetra Pak in terms of what we want to achieve? So that is also an important piece for us to consider.
Okay, thanks. We've talked about, I guess we've talked about how we got the program, we got to the stage of actually starting the program and commencing the program. We've talked about some of the outcomes of the program. What about the early days in terms of the launch and the implementation side of things, which was very much a partnership? But what were the key learnings from that, do you think, or key observations from that, or advice for people in the room?
I think you're referring to, like, once you decided and when you want to implement the program, what would be, the key learnings and what would be important? It's a great question. A decision is as, good as if it's implemented well. So when we were working on the implementation, I think now looking back and, just reflecting on what enabled the implementation to be smooth and successful was that we had, a team of dedicated people just really focusing and working on the implementation. And we're not just talking about anybody, but really making sure that we have experienced implementation project managers who are working on it. And then being really structured and anal about making sure that we've got clear actions, timelines mapped out, and watching it like a hawk, to make sure that things are really being done according to the time, because you only had that amount of time to implement. So when you miss certain timelines, it can potentially have big impact. So that would be my 3 key takeaways: making sure that you've got the right dedicated resources, very clear actions and timelines, and making sure that you monitor it like a hawk.
Thank you. And a number of organizations go in different ways. We talked yesterday about pilots, for example, people starting with a pilot program and expanding. But with Tetra Pak, basically you went 7 countries, big bang, one day. What was the thinking behind that? What was the rationale behind that?
Yeah, it's interesting because, we were sort of like in 2 minds. Should we stagger or should we go, big bang? And when we look at the context, the situation we were in then, which is back to this, we were moving, basically we were cutting over from an old way of working with an, old, or rather the previous setup to the new way. It was just, for me, unimaginable to have to allocate resources to be doing, things in 2 different ways. So it was better to just bite the bullet, bear with the, the initial pain, for longer-term happiness later on. So it wasn't, I thought it was an obvious choice for us that, we should go with a big bang. It's just, going to be just too much to have to put people to do 2 things at the same time in 2 different ways.
Yeah, and I think that certainly wouldn't, that big bang wouldn't have been possible if there wasn't a true partnership between the organizations. I think we realized as the partners, so to speak, that the pain we were experiencing to get to where we needed to go as quickly as we needed to get to, you were actually experiencing, your team was experiencing the same pain when we were all in it together. And I think all along the line, we'd all love to sit there and think every implementation is going to go 100% smooth. I would say no implementation goes 100% smoothly, and we need to tweak things along the way. We need to tweak models along the way. And back to that implementation point, whether we're outsourcing HR or whether we're outsourcing call centers, whether we're outsourcing whatever, my view is very strongly that if you start getting challenges in those programs, even if it's not recruitment, a lot of those challenges can be avoided if time is invested in the implementation stage as well, or the launch.
Yeah.
And we invested a lot of time in the launch. We had as part of that, before we even started, we had the whole team here in Singapore with the Tetra Pak team locked away for days on end, really going through process so that A, it wasn't the consultants that were trying to implement themselves as they were going along when they started the program, and B, these people, when they went out on site, they at least knew a good chunk of how things were working. Obviously, it never becomes real until you're actually doing it, but a lot of that ground was actually covered. So I think that was certainly very important to us as well. So I guess we've talked about some of the key measurable achievements. Were there any benefits from RPO that you didn't expect before the program?
You know, for us, the benefits, achieving the benefits is a done deal, it's more getting there. Yeah. So we needed to do everything that we needed to do to make sure that we are, you know, realizing on the benefits that we're set out to do. I think what came as perhaps a sweetener is that we were able to do that sooner than I thought. And when we say that able to do that sooner, what are they exactly? So we were able to meet the SLAs and the KPI sooner than we thought. We thought it was going to be a one-year pain, but by about 6 months or so, you know, things were looking more already on track. So that to me was a bonus. Then it's also seeing how engaged and how integrated the on-site recruiters were with us, you know, really feeling there was no difference at all, you know, they were not walking around wearing a Kelly hat and the rest of us, you know, wearing the Tetra Pak. It was really, you know, an integrated team. They're very much part of us. They're included in everything we do. So I think that itself was also, for me, really heartwarming to see the integration. The last one is, you know, to hear from the stakeholders, their experience. You know, that they're saying that, okay, well, it looks like it's working. I can see that it's on track. There's still things that we need to work on to improve. But the experience is coming from the stakeholders, the hiring managers, and the candidates were also looking positive at quite an early part of the journey.
Yeah, your point to, you know, it wasn't a lot of Kelly people walking around. It always kind of amuses me to ask our people that are part of the programs. I say to them, well, if the two Christmas parties are on the same day, whose Christmas party are you going to go to? Are you going to go to the Kelly one or are you going to go to the client one? And I don't know what's right, but I get a different answer every time. I don't know quite what to say when I ask that question. Okay, we're just going into the kind of wind-up now, and we'll have a little bit of time for questions. But Hsiao, I might just kind of hand this across to you in terms of, you know, what are your key learnings from the program? What are your key learnings in terms of RPO? What advice, additional advice that we haven't talked about in the room would you have?
Yeah. I think the first few that you see here, I mean, they are really, you know, what we would, it'll be clear to every one of us, you know, what is important. I'd actually like to elaborate a little bit more about the last 2 points, the strong collaboration and the fact that it's a journey. It is easy to, I think it's a trap to think that once, you know, you've worked so hard on the selection, the implementation, the minute you've gone live, that's it, that's the end. You know, the good news is that that's only the start. That's really only the start of a journey, right? You need to be able to, you know, have this mind to say that I'm going to channel my energy in the right places. The end outcome is going to work. So what does it take for it to work? Rather than to be always questioning and doubting, is this working? Maybe we should have selected something else, you know, or a different model. I mean, set yourself, give yourself that time frame. If it's 2 years, if it's 1 year, just, you know, set that as the end in mind that it's going to work. Work on the collaboration. You know, it's important that you're selecting a provider that you have that comfort that, you know, they're going to really be with you and partner you and be open and flexible to just work on areas that we need to improve. I think this willingness is really important and you know, just knowing that things are not going to be perfect from day one. You know, we just need to be able to quickly identify what we need to work on and then to work on it with no ifs and buts. That would be, you know, my strongest message to you, just reflecting on the own learning. I think the rest of it is pretty clear what we need to do in any new change.
Okay, thank you. And just a couple of thoughts from myself, and for those who've known me a while, I am getting older and I can't read just as quite as well as I used to be able to. But just in closing from my point of view, I think, I mentioned at the beginning, I think we've done a fantastic job of an industry of trying to define with so many different definitions of what RPO actually means. And I think as organizations, we need to move away from that a little bit. Maybe as suppliers, we need to move away from that a little bit and start looking at it from what is the solution the client actually is looking for. But I think we've done a good job of confusing ourselves as to what our industry jargon actually means. And it means something very different in every country. In China, a couple of weeks ago, everything was RPO. I don't think most of us in this room would define it as RPO, but in China, it was being defined as RPO. I think remember the importance of scalability and flexibility, particularly from when you're choosing your partner. I think that's very, very important. That's fundamentally important. I think it's something, as an industry, we will always continue to be challenged by, but something we all need to find solutions for. And I think as well, it's about, and I think from a Tetra Pak example, and Hsiao-Wei has shared a lot of this, but I saw it from a Tetra Pak perspective being very successful because it wasn't dictated. It was kind of, it was sold internally, decisions were made as a group, and it wasn't dictated so much as this is the new life, and this is the way it's actually going to be. I'd say collaboration is key. We've talked about that quite a lot. But the other side of that is trust is earned. And whilst at the beginning of the relationship, the chemistry was there, we've still got to gain each other's trust. And I think we've done that very much through openness. I think one thing that's certainly added a lot of value to us as a supplier point of view is the governance structure that we have in place. We've got stakeholders involved at all levels from both organizations. We meet very frequently. We discuss very openly. And our issues, our common issues, the challenges that we might have, get them on the table rather than skirt about it. And I think we really respect that as a supplier to Tetra Pak, that when we've got something that we need to address, you know, it's very openly discussed, and when we need to jump on something quickly, we know we're going to jump on something quickly. And also, I think the other thing is, you know, I mentioned at the beginning, consider blended solutions. That's the way the industry's going. And my 5 minutes is up. And that's the path we're going down. So I don't know whether in 10 years ago, we weren't really using the term RPO. 10, 15 years ago, anyway. In another 5 years, are we going to be talking about RPO or MSP, or will we have invented another term for these types of solutions? My guess is probably the latter, but what we call it isn't important. It's the solution that we actually bring to our clients that's the important bit. So on that note, I'd just like to thank Hsiao-Wei and Tetra Pak and Gillian for your partnership. It's one that we very much cherish. And also Margarita and our Kelly team, thank you as well for making this work for all of us. And thank you, everybody, today for listening to what we've got to say.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yep.
First of all, thank you for your sharing. It was very informative. This question is for Hsiao-Wei. Actually, I have a couple of questions. The first is, obviously, this is a model and a process that you believe in strongly, and it's worked well. So why is this not rolled out to, you know, countries outside of the region and confined to the 7 countries? I'm not sure if it's rolled out to the others, and maybe some rationale behind that. The second question is, with the benefit of hindsight, what would you have done differently?
Okay. Great question. The first one, I need to give you a bit of context. So while I'm the service center, while I run the service center that delivers to 2 clusters, South and Southeast Asia, where you've got the 7 countries, and then you've got Northeast Asia and Oceania, they were only just added. So that came into our portfolio just less than 2 months ago. So we're still in the process of, you know, continuous improvement and evaluating. It was more of like a, you know, a very condensed implementation. So we didn't have time to do the full suite of all the different evaluation. So I don't know what it might be, perhaps, It could be that we'll move into RPO because there are a lot more stakeholders and there are different contexts that we need to evaluate. So that's on the first question. On the second question, and I've asked this question before, and people laughed about it, when I tell them this. It's a little bit like, when you're asked, would you marry the same man again? Won't tell you how many years I've been married, but my answer would be, for RPO, yes, I would marry the same man again, and I would do the same thing again for South and Southeast Asia, for the context that it is, for the demands, and for what have you. So yes, I would not do it differently. Other questions?
Hi.
Hi.
Well, I'm actually a believer for RPO. I think Martin and the Kumar we spoke before, and I think it's just one question that I've been struggling for the past few years, as in based on the feedback that you got from your stakeholder, there's a positive feedback about RPO model. Do you think that if without RPO vendor, would your team be able to deliver the kind of services that your stakeholder will also give a thumbs up that says similar kind of feedback about the recruitment process if you've done it in-house yourself?
Great question. So first, if I bring it into context, right, I must acknowledge that the team that was there before, they were doing a great job. So they were definitely delivering on the recruitment expectation. So the context is that we're going to be moving into a different model, and they're moving actually into the different roles, into a specialist role. Would they, would that still be able to be done in the same level of effectiveness when it's structured this way, with the same, with the consideration like productivity and optimization of resources? I think that is where it will be a challenge to be able to continue to do that. An example is that in certain countries, we do not have the volume to be able to justify, having one full headcount to do that. So what do you want to do? Do you want to then support their recruitment remotely, from another country? Is that going to be effective, or not? So I'm not so sure, but my take is that in that old setup, that old model, they were doing a great job, and they were delivering definitely to the level of satisfaction. But when you cut over into a new model, when you've got different dynamics, different KPIs, there will be different sort of challenges and dynamics. Does that answer your question? It's probably a bit fluffy because, yeah. So what I'm saying is that it's very important, to recognize that it's not one size fits all. You really need to look at what is the context, what is your structure, what is your setup, what is your ambition, what do you want to achieve, what are your stakeholders expecting, and then you find a solution that is able to meet those expectations.
We have time for one more question. Go ahead.
Yeah, hi there.
Hi.
So I guess in terms of, you've always got to make a business case, and perhaps both of you can help answer this. And within that business case, there's data that needs to be included. So one, how did what data did you use, particularly if your team was delivering, what data did you use to make the business case internally? And how did you work together to get that data and present that data?
I guess I could share from my perspective first. I think here what we're talking about is, one is about the productivity. So, how do we achieve the business case around productivity, right? So if we are delivering on this number of vacancies today with this number of resources, what would it be? And what is the ambition? And then we move into the different KPIs. Like if today our time to hire is number of days, what is our expectation that, this new model will be able to deliver? Likewise for cost to hire. So there's a whole list, in fact, a very, very long list of KPIs that we put on dear Martin and keeping him awake at night that we monitor really closely. And so the business case was really built around making sure that we are delivering better, and delivering better as measured by those KPIs.
I think as well, just to add to that, I'm sure a lot of my industry colleagues will agree. One of the real challenges of getting any type of outsourcing program off the ground is really comparing with past data, whether it's an MSP program or whether it's an RPO program. I think we had the advantage here in that we might not have had all the data, but we had most of the data that we needed to be able to make real comparisons about what was happening today, and as an organization, what we needed to do or how we needed to put our model together to take that another step forward, given that there was already a successful process and a successful team in place. But we needed to show improvement on that. And that probably came through some very, very, very open conversations in terms of current state. So we had a very strong vision of what needed to happen or how we could move forward from that. You know, sometimes it's amazing how many organizations don't have the information available for us as suppliers to be able to make those decisions and make those comparisons. But there wasn't a lot of guesswork involved in this one. This was very, very open. And if we needed particular information that there hadn't been recording, Tetra Pak hadn't recording, we either found it or said, right, that's not available, but this is. So again, it just came to the real openness in the relationship, I think, in the early days.